Yo, what is going on, guys? It is your boy Tyler Mask, aka Tyler Suplex, aka Tyler Kuhn Williams. I'm not going to say that last part, given the context and the vibe of this episode. That last part's not really appropriate. But you guys get the point. You guys get the slogan. This is the 27th edition of the Chill Spell podcast. And yeah, not your usual intro. It's not really going to be a very happy-go-lucky episode. This episode is really dedicated to the late great Brodie Lee, otherwise known as Luke Harper in WWE, real name Jonathan Huber. He sadly passed away 2 days ago. Today is the December the 29th as I'm recording this. He passed away on the 26th, so I guess technically that would be 3 days ago when he passed away. But it's been a very troubling and very sad past few days. I mean, last we even heard or even seen Brodie Lee was AEW Dynamite 2 months ago. And I think it was even like 2 episodes ago I mentioned that something about the Dark Order, and I said that, oh, well, I haven't seen Brodie Lee in like a long time. And, you know, I said something along the lines of, I haven't seen Brodie Lee in a long time. Like, I remember like Brodie Lee's injured, but like we haven't gotten any updates. We haven't heard anything about Brodie Lee. So we were just kind of left wondering like, oh, what's going on? Is he due to come back? Like, wrestling fan, yeah, mindset is, oh, they're keeping under wraps. He's gonna make some big return very soon, but sadly that return never came, and he passed away due to lung issues that were non-COVID related, according to his wife. And he left behind a wife and 2 kids, and that is just really depressing to think about. And the other thing that's really depressing to think about with the passing of Brodie Lee is that his age. This guy is 41 years old. Like, I had to sit down and think about that for a second. Like, 41. My mother is 45 years old. Yeah, I'm 23. My mother had me when she was 21. She's 45 years old. And to think that Brodie Lee was 4 years younger than her, and he passed away due to a lung issue. I literally had to text my mom and I tell her that I love her. Like, I was telling people, like, yo, I love you. Like, it just makes you, realize how short life is. Life is not guaranteed to anybody. I think a lot of the times we kind of just take it for granted. We expect to wake up in the morning. We expect to go to work. We expect to come back home. You're always on your guard. You always, making sure that no danger comes to you. But, you expect to get from point A to point B, lay in your bed, go to sleep, rinse, repeat until you reach a certain age where you get old and, you're expected to die soon. Not many people expect to not live within the next week. And, I don't think anyone was expecting this to happen. Nobody was expecting this to happen or wanted this to happen. And it's just really depressing to think about that. And it was also depressing to think about the fact that this year we did lose Hana Kimura. She lost herself to suicide. She killed herself. That was really depressing because I met her earlier in the year, and I just started getting into Stardom, and I got into Stardom from Hana Kimura. So that really hit me hard. The Brodie Lee death, I would say it hit kind of the same, but different. Because with Hana Kimura, I only knew of her for like a year. I didn't really know of Hana Kimura for this lengthy period of time. I've been watching Brodie Lee for like 6 going on 7 years. Since its time in WWE, I've been watching him as Luke Harper. So I figured I'll take a few, or however long this is going to take. It may take even longer. I don't really care. Episode is mainly about him. I figured I'd take a few minutes to really go over the career of Brodie Lee and really my fandom for him growing up. So I have written down here that Brodie Lee started wrestling in 2003. Circling around a lot of independent wrestling scenes in those 10 years, from Chikara, Squared Circle Wrestling, Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate USA, Jersey All Pro Wrestling, Evolve, many other promotions I may not even know about. I didn't really watch any of his indie work because when I got into WWE, The only companies I knew of were WWE, WCW that WWE bought out, ECW that WWE also bought out, WWF, which WWE was once upon a time, and TNA, which wasn't really until like 2007. So I only knew of I didn't know these Japanese promotions. I didn't know that independent wrestling existed because WWE never told you that these companies existed. They only wanted you to know we are the only wrestling business in town. So this is all I knew about. I did watch like a couple of his matches in the last few days after his death, and he was a very talented. I always thought he was talented, but like he was exceptionally talented back then as well. It wasn't until 2012 when he was signed to a developmental contract with WWE. This is at the time when NXT was not really NXT. I mean, there was NXT in 2010. That's when it was the game show. And then they kind of just took that away and they became FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling. I still remember because on WWE SmackDown versus Raw 2000, I think 11, when you would open up the video game, I don't know if I don't remember if it was a loading screen. I think it was the opening screen of the game. Like the logo would come up and then it would zoom in and then it would pan to like John Cena and Randy Orton or like some two wrestlers on the ring, and it would basically be like almost like a training, like a how-to type session that you have as the opening screen of the game where you get to play against this wrestler for a little bit, and it would be in the FCW arena. So that was really how I knew what FCW was back in like 2011, but I didn't watch FCW. But that's where he started off. Him and Bray Wyatt, they kind of came in together. Bray Wyatt recruited Luke Harper in that period of time. He was the first son of the Wyatt family. They would later be accompanied by Eric Rowan, and the two later became NXT Tag Team Champions at one point. I was not watching NXT at the time when this happened. I think this is 2012, 2013. They lost the championships to Adrian Neville and Corey Graves. Believe it or not. Believe it or not, Adrian Neville and Corey Graves were once upon a time NXT Tag Team Champions. But shortly after they lost the NXT Tag Team Championships, they basically all but got called up to the main roster. This is the very first semblance of wrestlers getting called up to the main roster. And this is back then when wrestlers would get called up and they actually had plans and they were actually, stuff was done with them. So just wanted to put that out there as well. But they were teased on Monday Night Raw, and I still remember to this day because this is at a point in time when I actually watched Raw every single week. I still remember the opening, these segments. It would just be like random matches, like randomly in the show. You would just have these three guys, like hillbilly looking guys in this remote swamp like area, like Sister Abigail's house or whatever, and Bray Wyatt would be cutting this promo, and I always thought his promos were fucking sick. They were like very different from anybody else. Bray Wyatt was the only one who ever spoke in the promos. Luke Harper didn't speak, Eric Rowan didn't speak, but Bray Wyatt, he was talking. It was like nobody I ever thought of. I mean, when I saw the promo, I kind of always thought of Jake Roberts because I got that vibe from it, but like it was very unique and different, and it'll always end with "we're coming," and I just it still brings back memories, man, thinking about that. And then it was 1 week on Monday Night Raw when I think it was during a Kane match. The same segment aired, but this time it was different. It cuts to black, and then it opened up with Bray Wyatt holding a lantern. He lit it up. You can see Eric Rowan and Luke Harper kind of looking into it, then looking to the camera, and he's like, "We're here." Whew. And I'm sorry. And then like they came out. It was so cool, man. Like I'm literally getting nostalgia thinking about it. Like thinking about the Wyatt family coming out and attacking Kane. It built up to Bray Wyatt's debut match against Kane at SummerSlam 2013. He faced off against him in a Ring of Fire match, which it was boring, but that was his big match. I think that was the last time we actually seen an Inferno match in technically an Inferno match in WWE was that Ring of Fire match with Bray Wyatt and Kane, which is cool to think about. The last one being The Fiend versus Randy Orton, but we'll talk about that another time. So after Bray Wyatt beat Kane, they were just a dominating faction. They would face a trio of wrestlers and they would beat them, and they would, feud with a few guys. I think he feuded with Chris Jericho for a little bit. It was mainly focused around Bray Wyatt, and Luke Harper and Eric Rowan were his two heavies. And this later built until 2014. Now, at the time, there was the Wyatt family. They were a faction, But then at the same time, you had another faction known as the Shield. Everyone knows the Shield. You know, Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, like one of the greatest factions of all time. They were kept. They were at the same time because the Shield debuted in like I think the end of 2012, and then the Wyatt family came in like mid 2013. So the Shield had a few months on the Wyatt family already, but they were kept apart. Royal Rumble 2014, I think, is where Luke Harper made his like I don't think it was his in-ring debut, but I think it was like really where he started to get some limelight on his own. And then Elimination Chamber 2014, a little bit before that, we started to get the build to the Wyatt family versus the Shield, and that's when we got to Elimination Chamber 2014, where we got the Wyatt family versus the Shield 3-on-3 match. To this day, it's still one of my favorite six-man tag matches of all time. All guys shined in that match. Luke Harper, that was really, I would say, the match that opened my eyes to just how talented he was. Now, mind you, I didn't really watch that match until I think months later, because at this time I still couldn't buy pay-per-views. I had to find ways to watch these matches. But the week after, on Monday Night Raw, well, the day after on Monday Night Raw, we had a rematch, the Shield versus the Wyatt family, and I got to see that for free because I watched Raw, and that wasn't as great as the Elimination Chamber match was, but it was really good. Like, once again, back to back, like, they were just killing it. And Luke Harper and Seth Rollins, I still remember to this day, the shining stars of that match was Luke Harper and Seth Rollins, and that was the match that really opened my eyes for both men. Like, I knew that Seth Rollins, I always thought that Seth Rollins was the best member of the Shield. Like Roman Reigns, I thought he was cool at the time, but I never really thought he was the best member. And Dean Ambrose, I thought he was also like great on promos, but like his style was not really something that I was keen of. But Seth Rollins was always, when he had those hot tags, Seth Rollins is on one. Seth Rollins is great. And Luke Harper, he was always the best member in terms of wrestling ability of the Wyatt family. Like Bray Wyatt, I don't want to say he was bad because he's not bad, but he was never like good. Like he was never, let me not say that. He was never great. Like I never saw him as like a great wrestler. I can't name you a great Bray Wyatt match. Eric Rowan, I never thought he was good. Like Eric Rowan was just, nah. But Luke Harper, he shined out. And he was like the big heavy who could move around the ring and be agile. I still remember him hitting suicide dives and hitting power bombs and the twisting lariat. Oh, man. If there was one guy, because growing up, I always saw like the clothesline as just like a setup move until I got introduced to JBL, and then JBL would do the clothesline from hell, and I'm like, holy shit, that's so sick. But I never really appreciated the lariat until Luke Harper started doing the twisting lariat, ending matches with it, and I'm like, holy shit, this is the truth, man. I love this move. And I really started to get behind Luke Harper after that. Going forward, they had a bit of a mini feud with Bray Wyatt and Daniel Bryan, where Daniel Bryan joined the Wyatt family. Then we built up to that steel cage match on Raw between Bray Wyatt and Daniel Bryan, which to this day is still one of the best moments in Monday Night Raw history, where Daniel Bryan turns on Bray Wyatt. He's unzipping the hood. He's unzipping the tracksuit, taking it off. You have Luke Harper and Eric Rowan outside of the ring. It's a steel cage match, and Daniel Bryan, he's starting to attack him. He's going at he's taking off Eric Rowan because they're trying to climb the cage. He drop kicks Eric Rowan. He drop kicks Luke Harper, and then he's in the corner doing the slow. Yeah, I still remember. I'm literally. I think I was. I think I was in my room doing the slow yes chant. It's like yes, yes, yeah, and then there's this perfect shot of the crowd. And, like, it's the slow zoom out of Daniel Bryan doing the yes chant and the crowd behind him doing the yes chant. That is one of the greatest moments, like, ever. Like, I don't even care if it was Raw or not. Like, I still remember this to this day. It was awesome. And Luke Harper's a part of that moment. It was really cool. He still really didn't play much of a role into a lot of it. He was just really the background guy. It was really that mid-2014 period where Bray Wyatt set both Luke and Eric Rowan free of the Wyatt family. Like, they didn't really break up. If they did, it was a mutual breakup, so they can go on slight singles runs. Now, Eric Rowan had a singles run, and no one really cared. But Luke Harper, they started to get behind him for a little bit. He entered in an Intercontinental Championship feud with Dolph Ziggler for a little bit, and they got some really good matches out of those two, especially their match at TLC, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But Luke Harper even gained the Intercontinental Championship out of this feud. Like, Luke Harper was an IC champion, and this was at a time when the IC Championship actually was still, like, valuable. Now it doesn't mean shit, but it still had value to it. And he only held that championship, I think, for like a month before he lost it back to Dolph Ziggler and never won it back. But he was still, like, on top of his game. Like, if you ask me, like, what was the best year for John Hubert, at least from what I've seen, I think it was 2014. Like, 2014, from beginning to end, he was on fire. I mean, it consisted of the Shield versus Wyatt family matches. It consisted of Eric Rowan and Luke Harper versus Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso at Battleground 2014. It consisted of he versus Dolph Ziggler in that TLC match. You can list down a bunch of matches that he had, a lot of singles matches, a lot of tag matches. He was on fire in 2014, and it's a damn shame they didn't really do much after that. But getting into 2015, they didn't really do much, I would say, for 2015 or 2016. I can't really remember a single thing he did in 2016, honestly. Now, the end of 2016 is when they started to do something with him and Bray Wyatt. Eric Rowan, I don't think, was even a part of the Wyatt family at this point. But then there was this feud that started with Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. They had that House of Horrors match, was like the original cinematic match for WWE. Had the House of Horrors match. I later built to Randy Orton joining the Wyatt family. And I still remember, like, Luke Harper being very distant and very cold and very much not liking Randy Orton. Like, even though Bray Wyatt accepted Randy Orton into the Wyatt family, and, you know, this is his plan all along, Luke Harper never liked Randy Orton, and he never, ever wanted him to be part of the family. And he was very distrusting of him. And as the storyline progressed, they won the tag team championships. Randy and Luke Harper did. They only held it for, like, I think, like, less than a month, and then they lost it to American Alpha. But as the storyline progressed, Luke Harper just got cheered more and more and more. And I think I heard from a podcast, Solo Monster Sounds Off, that apparently, like, the point of the gimmick, the point of the feud, was not to get Luke Harper over, but to get over Randy Orton. And, like, the writers are like, no, we're trying to get over Randy Orton. And Luke Harper's like, you do realize this is going to get me over, right? And it did get him over. Like, fans were actually cheering for Luke Harper, and I can guarantee you that's not what the intent was, because WWE never intended to put Luke Harper. And that was very much true when we came in time for WrestleMania build-up, and they had a match between Luke Harper and Randy Orton to determine who would face Bray Wyatt, and Randy Orton won. They never inserted him into the match at all. Like, this was Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. And it was really sad because I honestly, and many people think this, and still think this to this day, that Luke Harper should have been a part of that championship match at WrestleMania 33 between Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton. The feud was a triple threat feud. It was Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt, and Luke Harper. Not Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt, and then Luke Harper in the background. Like, no. Luke Harper was just important to that storyline as Randy Orton was. Like, the distrusting nature he had towards Randy, him turning on, he even, like, kind of sort of turned on Bray Wyatt at one point and had there was a tag match on SmackDown. It was Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton versus Luke Harper and John Cena. And, like, for at least, like, a few nights, Luke Harper was a babyface. He was a babyface. And Randy Orton technically was a heel in the feud, even though he was a babyface against Bray Wyatt. In their feud, he was technically a heel. And he defeated Luke Harper, and that was kind of it for him. And it was really sad because he kind of fizzled out afterwards. Again, like, it seemed like there's always these spurts where they would push or do something with Luke Harper, and then, like, he would just fizzle out. Like, they would never do something with him year-round. He always had these periods where they would do something, and then they would just stop. They would do something, and then they would just stop. And then he would just not do anything else. So the rest of 2017, he didn't really do much. The late 2017, he reunited with Eric Rowan This time as the Bludgeon Brothers, which was basically their same act as the Wyatt family, but they were, more power-based and they were more barbaric in presentation. So, Bludgeon Brothers were a thing. I wasn't really like a humongous fan of the Bludgeon Brothers. I thought they were cool because I liked Luke Harper. I still didn't think Eric Rowan was anything to brag about. But they had a cool theme song. They had a cool vibe to them. Their unique entrance. And then they had a match at WrestleMania 34, Fatal 4-Way Tag match. If I remember correctly, it was the Bludgeon Brothers versus the New Day versus Ricochet and Aleister Black versus another team that I can't think about. But Eric Rowan and Luke Harper actually won that match. Luke Harper got the pin in that match to win the SmackDown Tag Team Championships. So he had his WrestleMania moment. Thankfully, he actually had a WrestleMania moment. Then months later, Eric Rowan went down with an injury, and that put the team on ice. Then Luke Harper went down with injury, and he was sidelined for a while. 2019 rolls around, and this is when frustration really started to build up between fans and WWE with how they were treating Luke Harper, because they started having him on house shows, like house show circuits. He was on the NXT house shows. He did a match or two in NXT for a little bit, and then they just stopped. And then WrestleMania 35 rolled around. And this is when we got the reports of Luke Harper asking for his release from his WWE contract, but it was denied. They would not release him. For whatever reason, they wouldn't let him go. And I never understood why they would not let him go. They weren't doing anything with him. Yes, he was the SmackDown Tag Team Champions a year ago. He won the match for his team. And, there's still things that I guess you can do with Eric Rowan and Bray Wyatt. But they actively were not even together because Eric Rowan was injured. Bray Wyatt wasn't doing anything at the time. So he had nothing to do. Let him go. But no. Didn't let him go. And I guess as a punishment, they just didn't book him for months upon end. And then we got the reports of his contract was coming up. But Vince McMahon would tack on 6 more months onto his contract due to him missing time from his injury. Which is like one of the scummiest things I ever heard. Like, this guy asked for his release. You obviously know he does not want to be with the company anymore. But not only do you say no, but then you add more fuel to the fire. You add more insult to injury by tacking more time onto his contract, adding more time onto a contract he wants to get released from because he was out with injury. Injury that he didn't cause. Injury that he can't control the time of. You tack more time onto him. Like, this is shit that I just can't forgive Vince for. I can't look at WWE the same way I used to look at them when I was younger again. Like, it's shit like this is to why I can't support this company, and I don't support this company. And it's not even just Luke Harper. It's really any wrestler this happened to. But Luke Harper was one of those guys where it's like, I knew he was capable of so much more. People knew he was capable of so much more, and he's not getting any younger. But they held on to him. And later in 2019, he came back, once again paired with Eric Rowan. It's like the only thing they thought he was good for was being paired with Eric Rowan. There was no other thing he could do. Nothing else he could do. No other gimmick he could portray. It was just him and Eric Rowan. And they were great as a tag team. But like, that was his glass ceiling, was Eric Rowan and Bray Wyatt. Nothing else. So they got paired up again for a short period of time. And they faced Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns at Hell in a Cell, and they lost. And then that was it. About a month later, WWE released 4 guys. Well, 5 guys, technically. 4 guys? Yeah, 4 guys. They released Sin Cara. They released Victor and Connor of the Ascension. And finally, they released Luke Harper, finally. They released him of his contract on December of 2019. And because he got released, he was put in a 3-month no-compete clause, so he cannot wrestle for another company until February 2020. Now, this is December 2019, so by this time, we're 2 months in to AEW Dynamite. Now, at this time, panning over to All Elite Wrestling, there was this faction known as the Dark Order. Now, the Dark Order at this time was being led by Evil Uno. I think it only consisted of Evil Uno and Stu Grayson. There wasn't even Alex. You know what? Never mind. Alex Reynolds and John Silver were a part of the Dark Order at this time, but it was just them, Evil Uno, and Stu Grayson. And they were really just, attacking wrestlers. And I still remember the very last episode of the year for Dynamite was them attacking the Elite and the crowd booing. And, everyone was just kind of, disinterested. This is a corny way to end the year. But then next year came around, they started teasing this exalted one, this leader, this higher power for the Dark Order. Who was going to be the leader? Who's going to be, the leader of the Dark Order? And, some people threw out the idea of it being Brodie Lee, but most people were guessing it was going to be Matt Hardy. Because Matt Hardy also got released recently as well. Well, I think he didn't get released, his contract expired. And people were like, oh, it's going to be Matt Hardy. It's going to be Matt Hardy. And even though Matt Hardy debuted on that same episode of Dynamite, it was the March 18th episode of AEW Dynamite where the Exalted One was revealed to be Brodie Lee. After weeks of it being teased to be Christopher Daniels, it was revealed to be Brodie Lee. And I still remember my reaction to it. I was just so excited, and maybe I could splice it in here as just a little tidbit, just to splice it in here and see how I sounded or whatever. But it was wow. Brodie Lee being a part of the Dark Order, being the leader of the Exalted One. And I still remember I did a video on it, I think a few months in, that I wasn't really big on the Dark Order because I felt like Brodie Lee kind of... It's hard talking about it now because you don't want to say anything negative about the guy. And I'm not saying anything negative about Brodie Lee at all. But I remember making a video about how Brodie Lee, as the leader of the Dark Order, I felt like it really didn't enhance the group as much. It didn't really do much to better the group. I felt like the group just kind of was made to look like Brodie Lee's underlings, and that was kind of it. When Evil Uno was the leader, they were kind of seen as equal, even though Evil Uno was obviously the leader and the talker. They weren't really seen as less important or more of cowardice than they were when Brodie Lee was in charge. And Brodie Lee, he was the evil dictator, so that was really to put over Brodie Lee, and they did. And he got fed, he was fed many guys leading up to his match with Jon Moxley at AEW Double or Nothing for the AEW Championship, which I wasn't really a big fan of that match upon first viewing. Watching it back, I did like it. I did think it was a good match. Brodie Lee was unsuccessful in defeating Jon Moxley. But you want to know what he was successful in? He was successful in beating Cody Rhodes for the TNT Championship. A few months later, after losing to Jon Moxley, and Cody Rhodes was 2 months into his TNT Open Challenge, he was then challenged by Brodie Lee. And Cody accepted on the terms of it being not a dog. No, I'm skipping ahead. He accepted, and then the week after we had Brodie Lee versus Cody Rhodes, and that was when we got the infamous squash match where Brodie Lee went in there and he beat Cody's ass for 5 minutes and pinned him, and that was it. And Brodie Lee was your new TNT champion. They did a stretcher out for Cody, and AJ attacked Brandi Rhodes. The Rhodes family was laid out. It was one of the craziest endings to Dynamite ever. And from there, Brodie Lee was champion for about a month and a half. He got 2 defenses in against Dustin Rhodes and Orange Cassidy. This led to the return of Cody, black-haired Cody, the Cody Taker, as I called him. He then basically teased at and hinted at a match, and that's when he made the challenge. And he said, I want to face you in a dog collar match, and Brodie Lee accepted. And that's when we got the match at Chris Jericho's 30th anniversary show on the October 7th edition of AEW Dynamite. We got Cody Rhodes versus Brodie Lee. And it was a tremendous match. It's easily one of my favorite matches of the year. I still believe it's one of the best matches AEW Dynamite's ever had. It was bloody, it was brutal, it was barbaric, it was everything you'd want out of a dog collar match. And to that day, I only have ever seen one dog collar match. And this is my second ever, and I thought it was great. And Cody Rhodes did win the belt back, and Brodie was out. We thought he was on injury leave. Well, I think he was on injury leave, but he later passed on. And it's sad to think that was the last match he was ever involved in. But in a bittersweet kind of way, I'm happy that it was, because he went out with a bang. That, honestly, is, in my opinion, the best match he had in his career. Outside of some other few matches. Like, that was the best match. The best singles match I've seen of Brodie Lee, of Luke Harper, of Jonathan Huber. That was his best match, in my opinion. That was his best singles match. I'm happy that I was able to watch it live. I did watch it live on Twitch because YouTube kicked me off of their platform for a while. I did watch it live on Twitch, and it was, man, trying not to get emotional thinking about that being his last match, but wow. Thinking back on his career, I did list my 5 favorite matches of his, and these are matches I mentioned earlier. Number 5 being the Shield versus the Wyatt family from the February 23rd edition of Monday Night Raw from 2014. Like I said, really, really, really good match. You guys can obviously watch that for free. It was an episode of Raw. Likely you don't have a DVR from 6-7 years ago, but you can watch it on YouTube. You can go watch it on an internet somewhere. You have the WWE Network, go to that and watch it. Number 4, Luke Harper versus Dolph Ziggler from TLC 2014. That was a very crazy match. A lot of cool spots in there. Luke Harper really showed out. Dolph Ziggler really showed out. It was enjoyable. Third match, the Shield versus the Wyatt family from Elimination Chamber 2014. Once again, this was the match that really opened my eyes to Luke Harper and just how great he was. And that honestly, I can say was the match that made me a fan of his. That was the match that made me a fan of his. And the second one is Luke Harper and Eric Rowan versus the Usos. 2 out of 3 falls match for the WWE Tag Team Championships at Battleground 2014. You notice the trend is that those 4 matches were all from 2014. That was just an outstanding tag team match. I plan to watch all 4 of these matches back on a live stream coming up in a few days, so watch out for that. And then the last one, as I mentioned, was Brodie Lee versus Cody from the October 7th edition of AEW Dynamite. Just a brutal match, bloody match. It was a great match. And yeah, that was the career of Brodie Lee from what I observed, because I didn't watch his entire career from 2003 and 2020, but from the 7 years I've been watching him, I always thought he was a outstandingly superb wrestler. And I felt like, we could sit here and talk about, oh, he should have been WWE champion, oh, he should have been this, oh, he should have been that. But looking back on what he did, he had some great matches. He accomplished quite a few things. He was in that WrestleMania match. He won the match for his team. He was an Intercontinental champion. He was the second ever TNT champion. He had a pretty accomplished career for himself. And even though it ended very short, he was due for so much more time on this earth. I think there's an appreciation for what he did for the business, what he did for me as a wrestling fan. He was a part of the Wyatt family, which I grew up on. He was in so many great moments. I still remember the match between Eric Rowan and The Rock, WrestleMania 32. Ridiculous, but Luke Harper was there as well. It's just sad. It's very sad, and it's very heartbreaking to hear about this, to hear about a wrestler passing away. But when it's a wrestler that you grew up on, it hits you hard. But when it's a wrestler that is active, I mean, Brodie Lee literally wrestled 2 months ago. 2 months ago. And he was likely due to return back very soon. He was an active wrestler on the AEW. I literally did live streams talking about this man. I literally was talking about him 2 weeks ago. Believing that he was going to be back very soon. Like, that's the really depressing thing about this man. He literally was an active wrestler and he passed away. Whew. All right. Let me calm down a little bit. Starting to get emotional here. But I don't really want to talk about this all too much. But rest in peace, Jonathan Hubert, 1979 to 2020. You will be greatly missed by many of your fans, wrestlers, family. He leaves behind 2 sons and his wife. I'm wishing the best for them. I'm wishing best for all of you through this troubling times. And I wish the best for professional wrestling, because this might take a while to recover from. But we're going to miss you, Brodie. Thank you for everything you've done for us. And yeah, all right, wrapping up from that, I got to introduce us again. This is the 27th episode of the Chill Spill podcast. I am Tyler Williams, and yeah, that was my little tribute homage to Brodie Lee. I want to take 30 minutes out of the show to talk about him, his career, and how I felt about him. But I'm trying to get back into the mode here. Let me get some water real quick. Try to get back into the zone. We don't have a lot of news. I wanted to make this primarily about Brodie Lee, so a lot of news I took out of here. We're just going to wrap up with the rest of my TylerSuplex Awards, and then a question from Mason Goldberg, and then we're going to end the show right there. So, might be one of the shortest episodes of the Chill Spill podcast yet, but hey. So, guys, getting into the Chill Spill podcast, episode 20. We continue on with the TylerSuplex Awards. As you guys know, we've been doing the TylerSuplex Award for the last few weeks. We've been doing plenty of categories. So before we get into the categories for this week, the last categories, we'll do a bit of a rehash over the winners of the TylerSuplex Awards. So here are our previous winners. Darkest Days of the Year went to Black Wednesday, when WWE released 40 of their talent. The Speaking Out movement and the death of Hana Kimura. An additional add-in is now going to be the death of Brodie Lee. That is truly one of the darkest days of the year. Most overrated wrestler went to Cody. Most overrated match went to Santana and Ortiz versus the Best Friends in the parking lot brawl from the September 10th edition of AEW Dynamite. Worst television show went to NXT. Worst feud went to Tetsuya Naito versus Evil. Worst wrestling show of the year went to WrestleMania 36 Night 2. Worst booking decision of the year went to Goldberg beating The Fiend at WWE Super Showdown for the Universal Championship. Worst match of the year went to Goldberg versus The Fiend at WWE Super Showdown. Worst wrestler of the year went to Kazuchika Okada. Most underrated wrestler of the year went to Yoshihashi. Hidden gem of the year went to Hiromu Takahashi versus Toru Yano at New Japan Cup 2020. Best cinematic match of the year went to AJ Styles versus The Undertaker. Best television announcer of the year went to Justin Roberts. Best manager of the year went to Paul Heyman for Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Rookie of the year went to John Silver, even though he's technically not a rookie. Young Lion of the year went to Yuya Uemura. Most improved of the year went to Saya Kamatani. Most consistent wrestler of the year went to Kenny Omega. Fighting Spirit / most must-see wrestler of the year went to Hangman Adam Page. Best promo cutter of the year went to Roman Reigns. Feud of the year went to Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. Junior heavyweight wrestler of the year went to Hiromu Takahashi. European wrestler of the year went to Volta. Mexican wrestler of the year went to Thunder Rosa. Japanese wrestler of the year went to Shingo Takagi. US / Canadian wrestler of the year went to Kenny Omega. And that leads us into this week's final categories. Best weekly TV show of the year. In this category we have NJPW Strong, Friday Night SmackDown, Monday Night Raw, AEW Dynamite, and WWE NXT. And the winner for Best Weekly TV Show of the Year is AEW Dynamite. This should come as no surprise to you guys. Monday Night Raw has sucked this year, and if nothing else proves it, the ratings will. SmackDown, while I heard it's been good for the latter half of the year, it was not great for all of the year. NJPW Strong really didn't come around until the latter half of the year, so I can't really count that too much. It's been okay from what I've seen, but it's not like 1 hour NXT. NXT won worst of the year, but I included it in best weekly TV show because it's one of the very few weekly TV shows that I watched. And then AEW Dynamite's in here. One that I watched most weeks. I would say of the 53 weeks of the year, I've seen 48 to 49. There were 2 or 3 episodes that I missed. There were a few that I missed live, but I ended up watching back. But overall, Dynamite I enjoyed. There was not a single Dynamite this year that I disliked. Like, there has still not been a bad episode of Dynamite in my opinion. There's been some Dynamites that weren't stellar. There have been some Dynamites that weren't great. There have been some Dynamites, but there hasn't been like a bad Dynamite. And God, we had some great Dynamites this year. And some of the best Dynamites were in the beginning of the year. January, February, those were like the golden months of the year for Dynamites. And COVID really fucked a lot of things up for them, but they managed to stick through, and they remained with their core fan base of 700,000 to 900,000 fans. And that's all you can ask for. And Dynamite, best weekly TV show of the year, very much deserved in my opinion. Pay-per-view of the year. These shows were not televised, but were pay-per-view, of course. And the categories are nominees. Oh Lord, I'm botching. Nominees are Impact Slammiversary 2020, Stardom Sendai Cinderella, NXT TakeOver Portland, AEW Evolution, Royal Rumble 2020, or Wrestle Kingdom Night 1. And the winner for pay-per-view of the year is AEW Revolution. I know, I probably sound like a real big AEW smark right here. You can call me whatever the fuck you want, but AEW Revolution, in my opinion, is still the best pay-per-view of the year. Not only did we get one of the greatest matches of the year in Kenny Omega, Heyman Page versus the Young Bucks, but the card overall was great. Outside of two matches, and Chris Statlander versus Nyla Rose, which wasn't bad. It was just, that filler match that happened. And Dustin Rhodes versus Jake Hager. The rest of the show was great. Like, you had Darby Allin versus Sammy Guevara, which was also really good fiery burst of energy. You had Cody versus MJF. You had Chris Jericho versus Jon Moxley. You had Orange Cassidy versus Pac. Like, you run down a list of matches on that show, and majority of them were really good or great. Like, Wrestle Kingdom, was a great show. I was there. I attended it. It's still going to be held in my heart very closely because I attended Wrestle Kingdom. The two matches on that show, the main evented, you can easily make an argument were better than any match on Revolution, and, I could definitely see that argument being held. But Revolution had more great matches, in my opinion. Royal Rumble 2020 was a really good show, but the only really good matches, once again, it's an outpopulated advantage that Revolution has. Like, I would give it to the Rumble match, the two Rumble matches, and Bray Wyatt versus Daniel Bryan, the Fiend versus Daniel Bryan. NXT TakeOver Portland, really good show, but once again, outpopulated. Stardom Sendai Cinderella, really good show, outpopulated. Impact Slammiversary, I enjoyed it for what it was, but it was never really a great show. So, pay-per-view of the year, AEW Revolution. Let's go. Non-pay-per-view of the year. In this category, we have AEW Dynamite, the February 12th edition. AEW Dynamite, the February 19th edition. They had like 2 weeks of outstanding television. NXT UK, the October 29th edition, which was main evented by Ilya Dragunov and Volta. And the G1 Climax 30, Day 13. And the winner for non-pay-per-view show of the year is G1 Climax 30, Day 13. Listen to me. Tomohiro Ishii versus Jeff Cobb. Jay White versus Yujiro Takahashi, Will Ospreay versus Taichi, Kota Ibushi versus Minoru Suzuki, and Shingo Takagi versus Kazuchika Okada. What do all these matches have in common? They were really good or above. Literally all of them. This is one of the very few shows of the year where it's rare in any year where you could find a show where every match was enjoyable. There was nothing that was not enjoyable about this show. Even the Young Lions match, you can make an argument was really good. Literally every match on this show, I enjoyed or I loved. And you can not say that for NXT UK because they only had the one main event, which was great. One of the best matches of the year, but it wasn't the entire show. Those 2 episodes of Dynamite had some great matches, but it wasn't the entire show. This entire show was outstanding. and it deserved it. New Japan, you get that award. Very well deserved. Very well deserved. Best Tag Team of the Year. In this category, we have Hangman Page and Kenny Omega, Sasha Banks and Bayley, Kota Ibushi and Hiroshi Tanahashi, Zack Sabre Jr. and Taichi, the Young Bucks, FTR, and Pete Dunne, Matt Riddle. And the winner for Tag Team of the Year goes to the Young Bucks. As much as the Little Dicks got on my nerves in the tail end of the year, I cannot deny that the Young Bucks had a killer year. Now, easily, I thought this category could have went to Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. But when I look back at it, though Page and Omega had, great matches this year, the Young Bucks really were, I would say, one of the best parts of the tag team division. You could take into all the multi-man tag matches they were in. You could take in the AEW Revolution match. You could take in the match between them and FTR. You could take in the match between them and Private Party. You could take in the match between them and Top Flight. The match between them and the Acclaimed. You could take in the match between them and Jurassic Express. They went through a lot of the tag teams in their roster, and they had killer matches throughout the entire year. I think people kind of forget just how great of a year the Young Bucks had. And I think it's time to end this discussion about the Young Bucks being this spotty tag team. Because yes, even though they can be spotty at times, and you can say they were spotty in the very beginning of their careers, they had some great matches this year. And they weren't just spot fest. So very deserving for the Young Bucks. Women's Wrestler of the Year. I will end up putting a woman in Wrestler of the Year. The winner of this category will go in the Wrestler of the Year category. Women's Wrestler of the Year nominees are Asuka, Io Shirai, Mayu Iwatani. Well, let me just say from company. Asuka of WWE main roster, Io Shirai of WWE NXT, Mayu Iwatani of Stardom, Utami Hayashishita of Stardom, Bayley of WWE main roster, Hikaru Shida of AEW, and Thunder Rosa of the NWA. And winner for Women's Wrestler of the Year is Mayu Iwatani. Woo! Yeah, let's go Mayu. I got a really, I could say bad rep early in the year for being a Mayu hater, which I never hated Mayu. I just always ragged on her for losing matches. But Mayu Iwatani was tremendous this year. From the very beginning of the year when she faced off against Momo at Stardom's 9th anniversary, to her match with Takumi Iroha, to her match with Jungle Kiona, to her match with Shiori, to her match with Konami, to really any match she had in the Firestar Grand Prix, especially her matches with Momo and Tom and Starlight Kid, to her match with Hana Kimura earlier in the year in the Stardom Cinderella show, to her match with Julia, to her match with Meika, to her match with lately it was Utami Hayashishita, to her recent tag team matches. She fucking killed it this year. It's on the night, unless you don't watch Stardom, which I ain't gonna say I watched every single episode of Stardom because I didn't. I just got busy, and Stardom was not a top priority for me. I'm gonna make it a priority next year. Mayu Iwatani was on top of her game as she is every single year, and it's undeniable. She is one of the best wrestlers in the world, male or female. So even though I think that Thunder Rosa was great, Shida was great, Bayley was great, Hayashishita, she got great towards the end of the year. Io was also great, and Asuka is still one of my all-time favorites. Mayu Iwatani very much deserves this. Match of the year. I am still in the process of my top 50 list. If you're watching this video, my top 50 matches of the year will be going up tomorrow on December the 31st, so watch out for that. You'll be finding out what is my match of the year. It's number 1. Moments of the year. In this category we have Edge returning at the Royal Rumble match this year, Drew McIntyre eliminating Brock Lesnar in this year's Rumble match, Matt Hardy debuts on AEW Dynamite, Brodie Lee debuts on AEW Dynamite, Evil turns on Tetsuya Naito and joins the Bullet Club at New Japan Cup 2020 Finals, Cody moonsaults off a steel cage onto Wardlow on an episode of AEW Dynamite, And Roman Reigns returns at SummerSlam 2020. And the winner for Moments of the Year goes to Edge, returning at the Royal Rumble this year. Yes, all these moments were very much shocking, and they were very much cool and awesome. But there was nothing quite as emotional that hit me in my heart and hit many fans like Edge returning this year. A man who was taken out of the wrestling business very early due to an injury, sidelined for 9 years, making his return at number 21 in the Royal Rumble to an outstanding, like one of the biggest pops I've ever seen. Like, I've been watching wrestling for over a decade. I have not seen every single match in history, but I've seen matches where there have been big pops, huge pops. But I've never seen one live as big as this one. When You Think You Know Me turned on, the crowd went apeshit. The crowd reactions were just crazy. I did my own reaction. I was freaking out. Me and my cousin were freaking out. You were fangirling. It was crazy, man. I never in my entire life thought I would see Edge back in the ring. I heard rumors, but I didn't think they were true, and it turned out to be true. And man, that was... I still think back. Literally, it's December, and I still watched that back a few times, just to hear that again. That's it's I would say it's one of the peak moments of the year, because everything else after that, it just fell off with COVID. This was the last time we saw a full packed crowd freaking out, and I think that's also why this moment is like moment of the year. This was one of the last moments that had a packed crowd that got a humongous pop. So I think it has to go with the Edge returning at the Royal Rumble. And lastly, Wrestler of the Year. In this category we have Mayu Iwatani, Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, Jay White, Tetsuya Naito, Jon Moxley, Roman Reigns, and Drew McIntyre. And the winner for Wrestler of 2020 is Jon Moxley. Woo! Jon Moxley. So originally, when I did my list, I was determined it was going to be Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega was tremendous. I thought he had a very outstanding year. He won most consistent wrestler of the year. But in time, I changed my answer to Jon Moxley. And I would like to say, give credit to Forsova for really convincing me of this in our latest episode of the Death of Pro Wrestling podcast. But Jon Moxley was very influential and very much a humongous piece of 2020. From the very beginning of the year, when he wrestled at Wrestle Kingdom, beat Lance Archer to become the IWGP US champion, and then retained against Juice Robinson the next night, to his match with Minoru Suzuki at New Beginning in Osaka, to his feud with Santana and Ortiz and Chris Jericho, the Inner Circle, to his feud with Brodie Lee, to his feud with MJF, to him going to an independent... He was actually booked on an independent wrestling show, GCW Bloodsport. He faced off against Chris Dickinson. Like, what a crazy thing to think of. A champion for a televised wrestling promotion technically wrestled on a independent wrestling show. That boggles my mind to this day thinking about that. But to even now, him and his feud with Kenny Omega, him losing the title to Omega, he's returning, I think, next week or week after, whatever. But it's undeniable to think that Jon Moxley had a tremendous 2020. He did. And I think that when you look at the careers of everybody else, yes, they all had great years. But I think that there was nobody who had a bigger impact really on pro wrestling as a whole as Jon Moxley did. So, for that matter, even though Hangman Page was great and he's still one of my favorite wrestlers of the year, Mayu Iwatani, Women's Wrestler of the Year, Jay White, really good year, Tetsuya Naito, he was champion, Drew McIntyre, he won Wrestler of the Year for WWE, he was really great, and I am entirely shocked that he was champion for as long as he was. Not that I didn't want him to, because I did, but he's their guy, and I'm happy for him. Roman Reigns, you can make argument, is wrestler of the year, but he really didn't start coming into his own until the latter half of the year, so I really can't even count that. Jon Moxley is very much deserving, in my opinion, of wrestler of the year. And that is the Tyler Suplex Awards. What did you guys think? Comment down below. Let your boy know. And finally, we get into our Patreon backers. I asked my Patreon backers, shout out to Mason Goldberg, Liam Version 1, and NJPW Fan 10. They asked questions, and I answered them. We only got a couple questions this week. They mainly knew I was going to talk about Brodie Lee, so that's why there was that many questions. I'll end it out with one of them, because the first one was Tokyo Dome predictions, which I did in the last episode. His last question he asked was, following Danny Hodges' passing, because Danny Hodges did pass away this week as well. I'm not familiar with Danny Hodges, but I didn't know who he was, and he was a big influence on wrestling business. He asked, who are your favorite classical wrestlers? Mason Goldberg. I am 23 years old. I was born in 1997. I did not grow up watching a lot of classical wrestling matches. I grew up in the Ruthless Aggression era. I grew up on Attitude Era matches and wrestlers. Classical wrestling matches, not so much. When you talk about classical wrestlers, I usually think of before the 80s. And I really didn't watch any wrestling from before the 80s. I've seen like a handful, maybe a couple, like two hands matches from the 70s, 60s, whatever. But a lot of the matches I've seen are from 80s and above. So I'm really going to talk about my favorite wrestlers from the 80s. And there's really only two. Because, yeah, Hulk Hogan was cool. And Macho Man Randy Savage and Andre the Giant, they're all cool. But I wasn't really huge fans of them. I really wasn't a huge fan of classical wrestlers in general. But when I think about, like, who are my favorite, like, wrestlers from, like, the golden era, I should say, there's two to come to mind. Jake the Snake Roberts and Roddy Piper. Like, Jake the Snake Roberts, I always loved the Snake. Like, there was no other wrestler that came out with the Snake but Jake the Snake Roberts. So I always thought he was cool. And Roddy Piper, I never really thought he was a great wrestler or anything, but he was always talking smack. The Piper's Pit I loved. I just always thought he was a great character, really good on the mic. He just had this vibe to him that was so captivating, and it was hard to look away from him. And when he passed away, he was one of the first wrestlers that passed away that I was actually very upset about. Because, like, I thought he was really cool growing up. And whenever he would return to Raw, like, back in, like, the early 2010s and 2000s, I would always, like, pop really big. Like, yeah, Roddy Piper, let's go. And even then, like, I still remember to this day his return in the 2008 Royal Rumble. It was so cool seeing that back when I was like a really, really big fan of WWE. But yeah, I would say it's Roddy Piper and Jake Roberts. Tokyo Dome predictions. I gave my predictions on last week's episode, so tune in for that. And guys, I'm so sorry that this had to be the end of Chillpo Podcast for 2020. We had to end it on a sad note with Brodie Lee's passing. But this was a tribute episode to him. So this was the final Chill Pill podcast of the year. This is, I believe, our 10th or 11th consecutive episode. I plan to do consecutive episodes going forward in 2021. That is my goal, is to keep this podcast going. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening in. At any point this year, if you listen to the Chill Pill podcast, thank you all so much. This was not a good year for me. It wasn't the very beginning of the year, but it was not in the end of the year. So it was a very mixed bag for me. Very beginning of the year to July, in terms of my social media presence, I thought it was one of the best years I've had. TBSIE fucked that up, and I didn't really get my channel back until the tail end. So yeah, my channel was really only active for 7 months, and that sucked. And I lost some people this year, family members. I lost some friends. People died from COVID. COVID ruined a lot of our social lives, personal lives. It was not a good year for any of us. So here's to hoping for a better 2021. I have a lot of goals set. I'll be talking about next year. Next episode will be my review of Wrestle Kingdom 15 Night 1 and 2. That will be the primary objective of the episode. And then it will close out with my predictions for 2021. And goals for 2021 as well. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Rest in peace, Jonathan Hubert. Rest in peace, Brodie Lee. Rest in peace, Luke Harper. And I will talk to you all soon. Have a safe and happy New Year, guys.